Welcome back. I'm so glad to see you again. Oh, you really enjoyed my book recommendation. You know what? I have great news for you. The great news is there's a sequel. I was very lucky and I got an advance reading copy of this. It's called Don't Fear the Reaper by Stephen Graham Jones. And it's the second book in the Indian Lake trilogy. I'm hoping it's a trilogy. I think he's mentioned it's a trilogy. Don't quote me. It sees the return of Jade Daniels back to Proof Rock after a long 4 years of being in prison. It's not really a surprise that she ended up in prison because she's not white and bad things happened in the first book that they really didn't have an explanation for. So, of course, someone put some of the blame on her. The return to Proof Rock is interesting because it doesn't start out with Jade as a focus. It actually starts out with a serial killer who is being transported through the area. And this serial killer is under such heavy guard, there's literally someone sitting behind him with a gun, waiting to just shoot him if something bad happens. Suffice it to say, he escapes. And we start back in Proof Rock with the slasher sequel. The book takes a little bit of a knock at slasher sequels, which sort of have their own set of rules, so to speak, especially the return of the final girl. And in this one, we see the return of Jade Daniels. This book really explores the notion of slasher sequels, and especially the return of final girls. Jade Daniels is back, she's out of prison, and she shows up on the same day that people start dying in Proof Rock. It's almost like she's destined to be there. She's destined to save the people of Proof Rock, but she kind of doesn't want to. Rather, she wants to save the people she cares about. And primarily, she's looking out for Letha. Letha's back, which I really enjoy. And Letha is married and has a family. It has been long enough that things have really changed in Proof Rock. Hardy has retired. He now runs the dam. He's up in that booth on his walker after being horribly injured in the first book. And he does it as sort of a way to connect with Jade and with his lost daughter. Letha has put a lot of money into the community. She's become this person who Jade kind of wanted her to be. She's caught up on her homework, so to speak. The interesting thing about this book is that we're back in the same position with Jade, except she's trying to deny that part of her. She doesn't want to talk about slashers anymore. She doesn't want to be that person because it connects her to her trauma. If she knows the rules, she can follow them and she can stay safe. But that's not what this is about. This is about saving people, saving teenagers who are dying. And in the middle of this snowstorm that has caused the town to be shut down, she's helping the only deputy left in town investigate what's going on. And she's not shying away from the blood. She's not shying away from the pain. She's not shying away from any of it, even though she's terrified. And again, bravery isn't always about not being scared. It's about facing your fears, despite knowing what the odds are. She doesn't really know who the killer is, other than it is probably the serial killer who's on the loose. So she's running around in the snowstorm with Letha, trying to find out what's happening, trying to stop him, or at least trying to get people inside and make them safe. And in the meantime, she's running into these horrible, horrible situations where it's just blood and gore. You know, sort of like the slasher sequel. You're walking in the door, You look down, the floor is covered with blood. People are dying. People are dead. People's faces have been peeled off. They've been hung on antlers. There's a lot going on in this book, but some of the things that I really enjoyed were the nod to slashers, again, the nod to recent slashers, which, they don't really show in prison. But Lisa has stayed caught up on them, so she knows a little bit more about where some of these are going. Again, in this book, you see the failure of the system to protect people. The kids aren't being protected by the police officer. They're being protected by this random person running around trying to help. They're not being protected by the system in a lot of ways. Some of the people who were affected by the slaughter in the first book are still around in this book, and they are still dealing with their trauma. It's almost become an urban legend, even though it's been 4 years, and only 4 years. It's almost like people have forgotten. And Jade really doesn't want to remember either. She really didn't want to come back to this, but she came back to see Artie. And in fact, when she does come back, she comes back and says, "My name isn't Jade anymore. It's Jennifer." I really hated that part, I'm not going to lie. It really seemed like, even though it was a way to deal with trauma, Jade was such a unique character. But she finds her groove again, and Letha helps her. Well, more like Letha sort of shoves her gently into the deep end and hopes that she swims again, and Jade does. Jade knows that there's more at stake here. Jade wants to protect Letha for an entirely different reason this time, and it's not because she's the final girl. She wants to protect Letha because Letha has a family. And Jade doesn't want her daughter to go without her parents. The lake still features pretty heavily in this, but the lake is frozen over. So instead of being this place where you might drown, it's this place where you might freeze. And there's all these nods to current slashers, which I really enjoyed. One of them being the throw the killer in the basement and then try to set them on fire and hope that they die, or assume that they're dead. We saw that in one of the latest Halloween movies. In the end, you're still left with the question, was the serial killer the only killer out there? There's mysteries happening that don't really get a full explanation, but there are a few things that get pointed out. One of the points that gets made is this obsession with tragedy, the obsession with serial killers and things that go wrong. In fact, there's a teacher who takes over Mr. Holmes' position, who really is only there to write a book about Prufrock. And he factors pretty prominently in this. I don't like this character, and I don't think you're supposed to like this character. I think, in fact, you're supposed to think that he's part of the problem, or a culprit. And in a few ways, he is a culprit, but not in the way that you think. And I'm not going to give you a spoiler on that one, but suffice it to say, he really does kind of get what he deserves. I think you're going to enjoy this one if you like the first one. I think you're going to enjoy it, especially if you like slasher sequels. If you're like me and you've seen all of the Scream franchise, if you've seen all of the Friday the 13th, if you've seen all the Nightmare on Elm Street. It's a really good return to that sort of mentality, but it also gives you that twist, because this is real life. This isn't just a book. Or rather, this isn't just a movie. It's a book about real people facing real trauma and real heartache. And it talks about that. It talks about privilege. It talks about failures of the system. But you know what? I think the most important thing and the most important words that came out of this for me were Jade Daniels is my final girl. And you know what? She always will be.